All right, so I'm a pretty neurotic person, I think. I think too much, basically. And I ruminate. Which is, I think, not a good thing to do. I would like to ruminate less. I like thinking a lot. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think I like that about me. But I think thinking the same thought that you've already thought over and over and over again, as if it's like a new thought, as if it's gonna help you this time. Like, ooh, you didn't think that before. Ooh, you didn't think that a million times before. Like, no, yeah, this time you're gonna get to the bottom of it. This time you're gonna get to the bottom of it. You're gonna have all the answers. You're gonna feel like you know everything. You're gonna feel great. You're gonna feel totally great. And then just do that every day. Just do that every day with the same thought. So I kind of wanna let someone in on this thought process and how it looks, how it plays out in my head, because I do it every day. And if you do it every day, I don't know, you gotta get it out there somehow at some point. Otherwise, it's like a huge part of you that no one gets to see, and I don't love that. I don't love having that. So at one point I'll give you a train of thought that I think in circles about sometimes. At one point I read a book. Well, I read most of a book. I actually didn't read the end of the book. Maybe all the answers to all of my questions were in the final 3 chapters of this way too long, didn't need to be this long book, called Gender and the Brain, Shattering the Myths of the Male and Female Mind by Gina Rapon. The basic idea behind it was that a lot of science, or supposed science of sex differences over the years, has been fake, has been bullshit, has been, biased actors doing shoddy empirical work to try and establish a difference, to justify whatever biases they already had, right? And so the way it starts is like a history of eugenics. So it's like, okay, so we had this eugenics history of sexists, like blatant sexists, like people who believe that women shouldn't read. So like next level sexists, arguing that was a biological feature. Women can't read. They just can't do it, because we've never taught them as a society, right? We never taught them how to read. But I'm sure that has nothing to do with the fact that they can't read. I'm sure that it's actually instead that they're just biologically hardwired to not be able to read. That must be it. Some people are saying, oh, what if we taught them to read? What if we just tried it? What if we just tried teaching them to read every once in a while? And I'm like, nah, I don't know about that. I think that they just can't do it. So that's how the book starts. And then it moves on to more modern stuff, like 80s and 90s. There was a lot of articles in like popular mainstream magazines saying, the truth about sex differences. We finally have like the truth about sex differences between men and women. And it would be like fMRI scans, which if you know anything about like neuroscientific research, we've moved past fMRI scans because they suck. They suck. They are like, it's like a tarot reading of your brain. It's statstrology. That's a term I've heard, statstrology. It's like as unreliable as astrology, but with the superficial like trimmings of statistics, bad statistical analysis. So we did that for a while, fMRI scans, and again it was trying to show the biases of that specific time. So it wasn't trying to say necessarily that like women can't read, but now it was on like women should definitely be paid less because they are biologically hardwired for rearing children and raising children, and they're going to choose to raise children. That's inevitable. It's just a result of their evolutionary psychology. So if they're paid less, there can't be discrimination. It can't be, a systemic economic problem. it must instead be that they're just biologically hardwired to make different life choices that make them get paid less. That argument's still around today. That one's still ticking. They also had stuff like women maybe shouldn't be in combat roles, or women shouldn't be in the military, because I think that was an issue at the time, if I remember correctly. There was stuff like babies. This was a big one. This was a big study. It was like it's one of the stupidest studies I've ever heard of in my life. So it's like a baby in the little in his bed. Looking up at one of those, I want to call them a carousel, one of the things where the little spinny things that slowly spins above them, and they would put stuff related to like engineering and science on the little spinny thing, and then they would put stuff related to like arts or like caring for children and or something on another one, and they would put those above the baby's beds. And they would basically see if the baby responds to these. And so the male baby, they say, apparently responded better to the engineering, to the gears and the tools of engineering. Which is just so stupid. Like if even if you believe that, and I think I might believe that male babies have like a sort of a pre-inclination towards like a rationality within their psychological processes, like within the way their brain is wired, and that's sort of more rigid thinking, which isn't necessarily good or bad. It's just more rigid, lends itself better to professions like engineering, in a sense. Even if you believe that, it doesn't make sense to think that a baby would know what a power tool is or what a gear is. Like, that's just not how that works. It's crazy talk. And so she debunks this study because people were taking the study seriously, apparently. And then she takes it seriously when she debunks it, because she's like, oh, this study had, there was only like 5. The sample size was only like 5. I'm like, bitch, the problem is the concept of the study. The problem is the foundational premises. If the sample size is too small, you're already talking too many steps removed from the fundamental problem with trying to draw conclusions from this nonsense. So she does all this work establishing that the history of these sorts of biological ideas is like not very well scientifically evidenced. Only to then get towards the end of the book, and I'm realizing that she's running out of room. She's running out of room at the end. I'm like, where's the part where she explains why there is scientific evidence for a socially constructed explanation for these behaviors? And she kind of has one. She argues for a neuroplastic understanding of the human brain. And neuroplasticity is kind of the hip new thing in neuroscience. It's an understanding that physical constructed differences in your brain are themselves shaped by your very, very early developmental experiences. And so these things that we thought were unmovable because they were biological features are also, to an extent at least, shaped by early experiences. But so this leaves you, if you're me, and you're just like a human being trying to live in the world and make sense of your experiences with other people, with men and women in your life. This leaves you with a couple of questions. Right? You're like, okay, so is the conclusion here that men and women aren't biologically different at all? Is that the conclusion? Because she says several times throughout the book, no. That's not what I'm saying. That is not what I'm saying. Of course, men and women have biological differences. Just, I'm going to spend this entire book talking about ways that they don't, and then implying a reason why they might not. Why it might all just be socially constructed. And I'm like, okay, that sounds like a sort of a neutral, nuanced argument, but at the end of the day, the book doesn't leave you with any guidelines for how you're supposed to think about this. It doesn't leave you with anything that where you're supposed to where you can walk away and be like, oh, I understand why men and women are the way they are now. You have no clue. You have no clue by the end of it. You're left with, okay, well, the evidence for it not being socially constructed is bad, but I didn't see a lot of evidence for it being socially constructed, and it kind of gives you the impression that she thinks, in the absence of evidence, you should lean on the side of social constructionism to avoid the sorts of biases that reproduce gendered inequalities like women not being taught how to read. That sort of thing. So, if you're me and you've just finished reading most of this book, I didn't read the whole book, I know. If you're me and you've read a significant portion of this book, and you're getting frustrated with it, and you're like, I want answers, and I don't know if these are satisfying answers for me. And then you open up Tinder, you lay down, you go back to relaxing. You're like, okay, let's go back to my personal life, my real actual life, and let's interact with some real human beings. Interacting with real human beings via Tinder, am I right? And you go on Tinder and you get 0 matches. You get because that's what Tinder is. That's what Tinder's for. Tinder is a roulette wheel. Tinder is a series of ads that they sell to you. And the longer you're swiping, the more ads they sell. That's how it works. If you stop swiping immediately because you fell in love, the first person on there was perfect. Something about their pheromones was matched to your pheromones, and you immediately fall in love with them via Tinder. They can't make any money. That's a terrible business model for them. So you're swiping through Tinder and you get no matches, but then you know that you've seen your female friends on Tinder, and you've seen their matches, and they just have this selection of angry men, but it's a wide selection, and it's wide enough that there's no way all of them can be angry and shitty. If 95% of the men that match with the average woman are angry and shitty, the remaining 5% is probably still a lot more matches than I get at all, period. So you're thinking about that and how unfair that feels and how much that sucks. And then you start to think, oh man, is that a sexist thought? To think that that's unfair, because you definitely couldn't express that thought alone in and of itself online. If I just if I had a Twitter, I don't have a Twitter, and I just tweeted the world is unfair to men. We don't get as many matches on Tinder. There'd be a huge subsection of the internet, probably people that largely agree with me and my opinions, I guess, criticizing me or calling me sexist. So you just kind of keep that thought to yourself. And I've tried to have this as a conversation with women in my real life. And it's always it's awkward. It's awkward, and there's this look on their face they're realizing that they're gonna have to have a conversation with someone that they don't know what to do. If a vaccine conspiracy theorist came up to me and was like, hey, I don't think these vaccines work. There's this study that says that they don't work, right? And I give them that face of I don't know that study, and I don't know how to tell you it's wrong, but I've seen this pattern before, and it doesn't lead to good thinking. So I'm pretty confident that whatever study you're looking at is a bad study. I can't know for sure, because I haven't ever seen or heard of this study, and I would like to pretend to be this perfectly open-minded person, that if you bring me a study and you're trying to change my mind, that I'll look at it, and I'll read it, and if it's a good study, then I'll believe it. But, I'm not a methodological expert for every single research field in the world. I'm not a if I read the study and it looks good, and it convinces me that vaccines don't work, because I didn't have the methodological skill to know why the study was bad. So now I have to rely on other people who know why the study is bad. And those people have their own partisan biases, right? And they probably, I'm going to have to find them through the internet. So is that reliable? Supposedly the internet's not reliable. So now I'm supposed to find a book. I'm supposed to find a book that's called like Why Vaccines Work Actually. Shut up. I'm supposed to find a book that's called Why Vaccines Work and You're Wrong about vaccines being bad. But then I opened that book and there's no way that book has this fucking specific study that came out in 2023. And my friends will give me that look that says I disagree with you. But I cannot explain to you why. I cannot explain to you why. I just want you to change, and I just want you to stop believing that, please. And that's the look I get. That's the look I suspect all men get if they start to talk about their feelings, about what happens on a dating app, about what happens in dating in general, and how they feel knowing that they don't really get to be the object of attraction. You know, they don't get to be the one with a million matches. Not even because they're, like, specifically ugly or anything like that, but just because they are a man. That alone. So then I think about that, and I think, okay, so maybe I decide I don't believe Gina Rapon. Right? Because I've gone on Tinder, and frankly, I've gone on Grindr, too. And there's a lot more options on there. A lot more options. Lots of men will immediately see my picture on Grindr and send me their dick and be like, hey, I live like 5 feet from your house somehow. Like right fucking next, if you've ever been on, you know what I'm talking, it's right next door. It's like, hey, I'm your uncle's friend from college. You want to suck my dick? So I know that it's a men versus women thing. Like it's not. I can tell viscerally in my day-to-day life that it's not a socially constructed thing. Because if you think about it, if it's socially constructed, the way that men treat dating and the way that women treat dating, if that's the case, you would think that the fact that our society teaches you shouldn't be gay, or that if you're a man you shouldn't like cross-dress, would discourage people just as much as, say, slut-shaming discourages women from reaching out to men sexually, right? But that doesn't seem to be the case. There seems to be an unending supply of horny men who are gay and cross-dressing and not really looking good while doing it, just in the neighborhood looking to have sex with anything that moves. And I just happen to be the thing moving. But then, you know, women, zero, none, anywhere. Just a quiet void where the absence of women is. So you see that, and it becomes pretty hard to believe the whole, because of neuroplasticity, it's all socially constructed from a young age due to our early developmental experiences. Like when you're a baby, I guess you see how men behave on TV and how women behave on TV even before you're like talking, and then you just that hardwires you. I don't know if I can buy that given my life experiences. So then you think that, and you think, okay, right? So because we're only at the beginning of this rabbit hole. This is a long video already, but you need to see the full neurosis of my mind. So then you think that. You think, okay, now we've got it down. We've got it down pat. We figured it out, okay? I believe men and women are fundamentally different. We have fundamentally different evolved psychological characteristics. And fuck anybody who argues with me. I'm so sick of having to think about this. Is this a simple truth? This has always been a simple truth. I'm so scared somebody's going to criticize me for this. I'm going to get canceled. No, I believe this, and you think you've got it. You've got it. Okay, you know what you believe. You know what you believe. That feels good. That feels good to be confident in what you believe and ready to argue with anybody who doesn't believe with you. Okay, so you think you got it, and then you start to think, so hold on, how is it so much of our society has come to accept this other idea that is all socially constructed? How have we gotten there? Probably just denial, right? I'm an atheist, so to me, 90% of the human species looks really stupid, because 90% of the human species, is religious, and religion to me is not even like, it's not just like a bad idea. It's like a really easy to see through, irrational idea. It's like it's hocus pocus idea. Literally, it involves magic. It involves the dead coming back to life and shit. It's ritualistic. So I already have like a general lack of faith in the thinking abilities of the majority of mankind, because I feel like I've already outpaced them. Just by being an atheist, I feel like I've like outpaced the rest of humanity. And I don't think that's because like I'm like a genius. I think that at some point the value of caring about truth more than caring about what this idea does for me personally was instilled in me. And I don't know how, but I think it was instilled in me. Or maybe like, I don't know, autism or something. Maybe have autism. I don't know. So something. So I already have a lack of faith in humanity. So it wouldn't be too far out of reach to say, well, what if all of humanity has just decided to stupidly, irrationally believe in this social constructionist theory? So I start to think that, and then I'm like, well, hold on, I'm a free thinker, right? Yeah, I'm a free thinker, and I've looked into the ideas of a lot of people from across the political spectrum, and I know that there was this guy, Charles Murray, right? And Charles Murray was a race scientist. He wrote The Bell Curve in the 80s and ignited this fierce debate over race science and racial IQ differences. And he tends to argue with a very similar tone that most of humanity just refuses to acknowledge racial differences, that we just seek to deny them and treat them as socially constructed because we don't like to confront that reality. We don't like to confront that reality. And he never stopped writing. He got into a huge debate with Jay Gould in The Mismeasure of Man, and I've watched people thoroughly debunk Charles Murray's ideas about IQ and about racial IQ. A lot of people argue that IQ, can't even really be measured, and I've seen that argument play out. And that makes sense, right? Intelligence isn't one thing, it's a bunch of different things, so you can't just measure it, you can't just reduce it to a number. That makes sense to me. The idea that our metrics are deeply limited. And so the idea of trying to measure IQs against each other is stupid and wrong. But he has a new book. 2020, this is the balls. I saw this in Barnes & Noble. And the book is called The Biology of Race, Class, and Gender. And he's a smart guy. He's not one of these loud, in the news cycle conservatives. He's a quiet, behind the scenes, pulling the strings kind of a fellow. So he's going to take advantage of the current culture war. And so in the opening sections of his book, he's like, hey, you know how all this trans stuff doesn't make any sense? Yeah, this weird trans stuff you never heard about back in the 80s? Yeah, I'm talking to you, Gen X. Yeah, you know how weird it feels, right? That truth has just changed around you, and your children are fully on board. And you don't know what happened. And you ask them to explain it to you, and there's all these holes. There's all these holes you still have in the explanation. Like, you're trying to get it, you kind of get it. You don't want to be an asshole. And they look at you like you're an asshole. But there's all these holes in what they're saying. And you can't fill those holes. He's like, yeah, well, guess what? I got the answer. I can fill those holes. In section 3. In section 3 of my book. And in section 1, we're going to talk about some agreeable stuff. We're going to talk about class. And in another section of the book, we're going to talk about race. And I'm going to convince you that this is all the same thing. The same group of people who are now trying to erase biological sex already erased biological race, and you bought it. You bought it. In fact, you bought it so hard that you had every conservative commentator, every fucking Rush Limbaugh motherfucker out there saying, I'm not a racist. Racists believe in racial biology. Me, I don't believe that. I just believe that this rap music is encouraging a criminal culture in the minds of black youth. That's completely different. That's not racist at all. That's not racist. No. If you want a real racist, the conservatives said, look at somebody who believes in racial biology. Now that's real racism. So you have this thing which is like the epitome of racism. This is the thing that you were warned about. This is the worst thing. This is the racism. And it's being advocated for in the same breath as the acknowledgement of sex differences between men and women. So it's like, hey, let me just slip this in here. So now if you're me and you're open-minded, gotta be open-minded. Why do I gotta be so fucking open-minded? And you're thinking all day, you start to think, okay, well now that I've decided that I believe men and women are different, maybe I can open the door to this one. Maybe I can open this door. I'm edgy. I like dark truths the rest of the world isn't willing to accept. Maybe I'm going to open this racial biology door. See what's behind it. Take a peek around. But every time you open it up, the empirical work is shoddy. And you listen to a lot of voices on the left, and the voices on the left tell you how evil it is, and you're right, yeah, it is, yeah. But then you hear those voices on the left say how evil the belief in sex differences is again, and you just go in this big fucking circle. Where the world, as it made sense to you as a child, as a teenager, up until really just a year or two ago, where it was commonly understood that men and women were different, but also that sexism existed. Both of those were true. And that it was difficult to parse out the distinctions between sexism and biological differences between men and women, but that we were engaged in a collective process of finding where exactly the line was, and that racial biology had already been damned to the history books, but that racism remained. That world suddenly feels very unstable. Suddenly, everything you knew is on rocky foundations. There are books that feel just as smart as Gina Rapon's Gender in the Brain, like The Evolution of Desire by David M. Buss. There are books that are maybe not super scientific, but just sort of philosophical, like Begging for Sex by John Pepple, Datanomics by John Berger, that's another one. A lot of these books seem to make arguments that there are relationships between dating and the economy and politics and social structures, as well as between dating and evolutionary psychology. And they're very smart, and they have a lot of studies. And if you look into evolutionary psychology, you'll very quickly find that these very smart people have been criticized by other very smart people who think that evolutionary psychology, even as a field, is bullshit. And then you'll find articles arguing, from evolutionary psychologists against the critics of evolutionary psychology, saying that the critics are bullshit. And that's pretty much where I'm at now. So I'm going to do whatever I think is most helpful to people, trying to make the world better. I'm going to try and be constructive, even though sometimes constructivism and truth don't really pair well together. Right, because a lot of times you have to accept truths that don't make you feel so good, And that doesn't exactly feel very constructive, having to accept a truth like life is meaningless. That doesn't feel constructive. You know, the idea that life is meaningful can be very constructive, but I've already accepted the idea that life is meaningless. That took me a while, so I'm not really ready to undo it yet. I'm really ready to flip-flop back. Yeah, we need some deep breaths in here. Need some deep breaths. So this is about the part where my rumination starts to start over again, because I start to realize that by being constructive and trying to focus on, hey, what are some solutions we can find that make life better for Black people and white people, men and women, that, you know, just feel pragmatic and useful and feel like they would just function well. I've come up with some ideas for ideas drawn from feminism for how to make our system care more about domestic abuse and sexual assault and sexual harassment. And I've done some reading into those subjects. But I've also done some reading into why dating sucks so much for men. And I've tried to find solutions culturally, politically, to that as well, to sort of deepen the conversation, so that instead of just having a bunch of men quietly trying not to say out loud that it sucks for them, or very loudly giving up on being quiet and raging against the world for forcing them to deny this real part of their life, that they can have some more constructive solutions that can better their relationships with the women around them, better their relationship with society, make society better for them, etc., etc. And I don't always fully know whether these ideas are perfectly compatible. I just know that we could take steps in a positive direction. But then I'll start to criticize my own constructivism. And when you start to criticize your own constructivism, you have to turn towards objective truth, right? If thinking in a way that is helpful to you, that is constructive to you, if you want to criticize that, a good way to criticize it is to say, well, sure, it's constructive, but it's not true. So how do you know what's true? You turn to the science. And then I turn to the science and I open up a book like Gina Rappon's Gender in the Brain. And that's the circle. There you go. There's the circle. There you go. 33-minute video. 33-minute video. Okay. I'm going to have a green screen soon. I'm going to start trying to do this. Maybe with a script. I don't know how to do this. But I'm going to start trying to do maybe YouTube videos out of my Facebook posts. For now, have this gateway into my neurotic circular thought process. And if you want to get angry at me in the comments for even considering some of the stuff that goes through my brain, feel free to do that. But just know that there's already a tiny you in here. All right? There's already your voice. There's nothing you can say that I have not already thought 1,000,000 times.